Hey, thanks so much for joining. I'm Jeremy. Yes, I have a beanie on. No, I don't have my coffee. We're going to go over some VBA tips. Stick around and you're going to get a bonus tip, again, that's really going to help you not only in VBA coding, but also in Access in general. Thanks so much for watching. Tip number three, rather, or counting up number three, is when you're learning VBA for the first time, consider using Access. Now, you may think, why should I use Access? You're biased because you run an Access channel. Yes, you're correct. Is it because I think Access is the best thing Microsoft has ever developed? No, it is not that, although Access is the best thing Microsoft has ever developed. No, the reason I suggest you use Access to learn VBA is because it's easier to conceptualize Access versus something like Excel. And what do I mean by that? In Access, you can create a form, you can create controls, labels, text boxes, images, etc. And then you can easily refer to those objects in VBA code from within Access. And it's easier, especially for a new coder, to realize what they're doing because they can see the results on the screen. When you start using something like Excel or maybe PowerPoint to learn VBA, Excel's pretty straightforward, yes, but then when you start getting into text boxes and things like that, it gets a little weird because of how Excel is structured, and it's a little bit harder to understand what you're working with. When you start talking about things like ranges or collections of text boxes and et cetera, and although Access does have them, Access also has more controls for a form so that when you make that form and you want to practice some code behind it, you can easily see, okay, I wrote some code to make this text box red. I can easily see the text box is red. So that's why I think for a brand new VBA coder, unless you're really going for specific Excel type functions, Access may actually be an easier environment to learn VBA, and then you can jump over to those other applications as required. Tip number two, really get into the habit of formatting your code and writing it in kind of a template style. And what do I mean by that is when you start coding, get into whatever habit suits you to write your code modules. So for instance, I personally, when I start coding, I start at the top with my variable declarations, and then I set any variables that may be able to be set at that time, and then I go into my logic. Some people like to declare variables as they're used. I personally cannot stand that.
No! God, please, no!
I always declare my variables at the top. That way I know, okay, here's what I'm dealing with in the code module, and then I can go from there. And then I can focus mostly on the logic as I'm reading through. The reason you want to do this is it really helps you mentally prepare for what you're reading as you get into your code, even if someone else is reading your code. And even if they don't use the same style you do, they will get used to your style very quickly, and so they'll know what to expect. And the number one tip, if you're starting to learn VBA, here's one thing you have to wrap your mind around. Do not think of the code as just a big list of instructions that you follow in order. While yes, technically each procedure is like that, as your code starts to get larger and your databases or your applications get larger, you need to think of the code as little robots or little black boxes that may take arguments or may take variables, basically what we would call an argument. So they may take arguments and they may give you arguments, but think of that black box as a self-contained thing that does something. So because again, as your applications get larger, you may have dozens and dozens and even hundreds of procedures spread out through your program, especially with large access programs. And you can't think of it in your mind as, oh, well, this is just a big list of instructions and this is just a big list of instructions. You have to think of it as, okay, I've got this black box and this black box is expecting to get a circle, and then it's going to give me a number, right? So it's going to return a number. So that's kind of a function. Okay, I know that box does that. And then I'm going to take this other box, this other piece of code over here. It's expecting a number, and I'm going to give it, I'm going to change my form to blue or something, or whatever the number value is. So once you start to think like that, that helps you with everything. That helps you with how you lay out your code, whether your code is behind forms or your code is in standalone procedures. And this applies to practically any language, not just VBA. In Access, it gets even better because with the object model, you can think of even entire databases as little black boxes, and you can use multiple databases. It gets really wild. We won't get into that. And now our bonus tip. Our bonus tip is, I forgot, always play the what if game. So as you're starting to write your code, ask yourself, what if? What if the user did not put in a particular field that I was expecting? What if they did something out of order and they did step B first and then they did step A? So as you're designing your Access apps, or even as you're coding and you're not even in Access, but you're coding VBA or even another language, you have to think of what if. What if that parameter doesn't exist and I'm expecting to exist? So as you start to play the what if game, that really helps with the stability of your code. And you'll note that yes, things do get complex. About 80% of my work is literally preventing users from making mistakes.
I'm not a smart man.
But as it gets more complex, it'll also get very much more robust. Your code will become much more robust because you've thought of basically all of the parameters and all of the conditions that your application could be possibly in. And that's it. Thanks so much for joining us. I really hope if you find this useful, you subscribe. I'm working as of today on a full database build video. It'll probably be at least 2 videos. That's coming soon. Stay tuned. Thank you so much. God bless.